What's up, everyone? Welcome to the channel, More Than Mortgage. I'm Chad Anderson. Zach Jones over here on the side. Appreciate you hanging out with us. And today we're kind of going into a little bit more math like we did early on in this channel or series, or kind of in our beginning steps of our journey, and breaking down something that comes up quite often. And it's the good old fashioned buy versus rent. So we're going to do some calculations there and kind of poke some holes in some things and compare the two, and give you some ideas and whatnot, and just food for thought type of thing. So first, though, what we want you to do is make sure you follow us on these socials here: YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Over here is there-ish. Microphone's in the way. Zach Jones Loans over here. This Chad is real. And make sure you follow us there. Again, like, subscribe, comment, download, hit the bell, DM, whatever, all of it. Reach out to us in some way, shape, or form. All right, so let's get into this buy versus rent. Zach, it keeps coming up, these charts, and people say, oh no, a few years ago, renting cost more than buying, and now rates are higher. Oh, you should rent instead of buy. Who wants to pay these kinds of rates? But housing is appreciating. The asset gets better and better and better. Then there's the argument of, yeah, but what's the upkeep on something you own, and having to make all those payments and property taxes and insurances and yada, 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 and on and on. And so I'm kind of excited about this because I feel like this is a topic that it gets brought up when there's maybe a narrative or an agenda to push, but it's really something that anybody who considers renting, you should really step back and try to do a little bit of a roadmap and really break down the numbers. I think a lot of times people, when they're wanting to buy a home and they get a mortgage, they get into a spot where, especially now when there's low inventory, and maybe sometimes people just throw their hands up and say, screw it, I'm just going to rent. And they just kind of take that on a little bit, or they hear one number and one argument and go that path. But anyway, this was one that you definitely wanted to hit on.
Yeah, and I think that there's an inherent trap in that. Well, I'll just rent for a little while and kind of see what happens with the market. And I've just almost wearied myself saying this over and over again about the value of homes continues to move up and up and up. We've seen a slowdown of that, but we're slowing down from 25% a year down to 5 or 6% a year, depending on the market that you're in. That's kind of the disclaimer to all of this, is that all real estate, everything that we talk about, is local to your community. And so you have to do the math based on what's going on in your particular market, because I might say that real estate is appreciating at 6% per year in Middle Tennessee, which is my primary market. And that might be 4% per year if you're in, Pontiac, Michigan, but it also might be 11% per year in Las Vegas. So you've got to do the local math. But I always try to look at maybe what agenda is being pushed behind the scenes. If the media is coming out and talking about how much cheaper it is to rent than it is to own, what are they really basing that on? And what are the assumptions behind those numbers? And that's where, if you've got some really good tools and you know how to do the math, you can do a more in-depth analysis on that. I'm still old school of the belief, having bought a house when I was 20 or 21 years old, that owning real estate over a long period of time puts you into a much better position as far as wealth building over the course of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different decades of doing that, and put you in a great position with your legacy for your kids. So the math is going to work and compound over time in that direction in most scenarios. Now, you could argue things in 2010 and 2011 being the most prominent down periods in real estate in our modern history, but that's not a realistic argument to be made. And it's not enough either to kind of fall victim to that, the social media, the generation envy. Oh, okay, boomer. Oh, okay, millennial. Oh, okay, Gen X. Okay, Gen Z doesn't have a chance. All of that generational stuff is just it's a lazy attempt to divide, in my opinion, because we all have a lot to learn from each other and a lot to teach each other.
Well, let's break it down. And Zach and I have this handy little tool that comes from our friends at what used to be known as MBS Highway. Now it's just called Highway. But it's a great website. It's very useful, especially for mortgage originators. And prayers to our friend Barry Habib, who runs the site, is the owner of the site, battling some health issues. Certainly wish him the best. But this is something Zach and I have the ability to use. And by the way, if you want us to look at other things, we both have access to all these different calculators. So if you look at these real fast, well, it won't do it because we're zoomed in, but it has things about discount points and debt consolidation and the rule of 32 and all these different ideas and thoughts, and does it make sense based on your house and using your equity and your asset, or doing buy versus rent and how that pans out. So a lot of really cool things that we can really dive into, and we pay for these subscriptions. So this is
Dearly.
something that, this is a this is a big deal, where they take it is still just math, but figuring out the math is difficult. And so this allows us to plug things in, and makes it very simple. So we're going to call this More Than Mortgage 28. Let's just use Franklin's zip code is fine. We'll go Williamson County here. We want to say 600,000, 500,000, something like that.
600. Let's go 600.
600. Okay, $600,000. Let's hit next here. And so it allows us to put in all these pieces of information, and do some tool edits as well. So let's edit the loan scenario. Okay. I like to say, well, what's the national average today, by the way? And when this is recorded compared to when you're watching it, could be two different national averages. So don't start yelling at me about how it's not the rate today. All right. So 7.12, 1% discount's fine because that's kind of the average. Monthly mortgage insurance, that's fine. Closing costs, let's bump this up a little bit and just say 15 grand. Prepaid escrows, we'll just say you're waiving escrows and there are no, we still have the insurance, I guess, 2,000, right? APR there. All that look good, Zach?
Yep,
fair?
it's fine there.
Save that. We're not going to co-brand right now. But this tells us,
Go back up a little bit, Chad, and let's take a look at what they're assuming for rent.
Did I miss that one?
It's a little bit above. There's your renting.
I'm sorry, thank you. I missed it because of the loan. So they're assuming $3,048 is your monthly rent. $46 for renter's insurance, and then the annual rental increase. National average is 4.5%. This is set up at 3.4. Let's make it the national average. Okay, let's just do that and let's save it. All right. So this is
what
also
are our assumptions about appreciation rate? Look under the property at 600,000. Nope, a little bit up.
Right here.
Yep.
Annual property tax. That's about right.
That's right.
Yeah, that's fine. Cost to sell. Yeah.
So there's your forecast.
Let's go custom.
Because we're in Franklin, you're looking at 5.5 to 6%. So
let's use 6. That's what year over year was. 2023 over 22
in the last 12 months. Yeah. Last 12 months. So
let's use 6. All right.
And that's a slow year too, Chad, for real estate. One of the slowest years we've had, and it's still at 6%.
So we'll go off that. I also want to trim this back. I just want to look at 5 years.
Yeah, because people don't own things for a longer period of time, and it's a shorter term window to look at. If you're thinking about renting for a little while, it's easy to move in, but it's hard to move out, right? So you get stuck in that little trap of for a little while turns into 3.5 years before you start looking again.
So if you look here, the net gain, and we'll break this down, but the net gain by buying a home, $35,000, right there. Now, these other years, it continues to get more and more and more. And you could I mean, look at what you're missing out on some of these appreciation rates. I mean, year 7, you're at $212,000. So that's what you're missing out on. And remember too, if you rent and delay buying until here, well, you've missed out on all the appreciation that calculates to get to here. So again, your starting point, kind of backs up a little bit. So appreciation gain, this is the 114. Your house is worth 714 after 3 years. You may say that's crazy. That's the fact. That's the number. Now,
Mhm.
obviously, market conditions can change that, but currently we're still in such a low inventory world that you go back. I get so tired. I know you do too, Zach, but tell me if I'm missing anything on this analogy or this comparison of stats. In 2008, there were 3.5 million homes for sale.
Mhm.
Currently, there's 1.1, and about half of those are either not built or under contract.
Right.
So you can't even buy them, or you can't move in today or move in 30 days. Um, and again, taking into account some of that other stuff, like
Well,
being under contract.
and I want to make that first number a little bit more meaningful. Appreciation gain of $114,000 in 3 years. That's $3,100 a month, Chad.
Yeah.
That's $3,100 a month that $600,000 asset is appreciating in value while you're living in it.
Yeah. While you're
Yeah,
using the asset. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Correct. So you can see here, there's a cash flow difference. There's a purchase closing costs that you'll have. That's if the seller paid for zero. Today's market, I mean, sellers aren't going crazy with paying for buyer closing costs, but you can get them to pay a little bit. I mean, I see sellers will still pay title,
Sure.
or something small comes out to be a few $1,000s credit. So that could even potentially be a little bit less. Um, the tax benefit, another $7,800 here. It also factors in the cost to sell, based on a future value of 714. So fair. They're,
Right.
they're
So,
figuring
so
that.
your cost to own it is inclusive of your cost to liquidate the asset at full price, at full 6% commission to the agents.
Correct. So now you have total rent here with your annual rent increase, total buying costs, based on this, and that's where you get your negative cash flow on the deal. You break it down to principal, interest, right here. Obviously, not pretty when you amortize over 30 years. Still, you come out ahead better with buying versus renting. And here comes the different breakdowns. So you can see that, yes, obviously buying costs more from a cash flow perspective. But again, we're looking at what do you come out ahead? And after 3 years, you're still 34, 35 grand to the positive. And 4 years, you're 72,000. Look at how quickly it accelerates after that first couple of years. So the point is that when you look at these, also one other thing I want to hit on real fast is that we're assuming here, well, if two things. One, if rates dip, you're going to refinance. So then this is going to come down. Refinance costs are significantly less than purchase costs. So this is going to come down, half a point, point and a half, whatever the market bears. But if rates drop, you're going to refinance. Also, if rates drop, you're going to want to refinance and you're going to get something better. But this right here is going to explode. That right there, that'll change.
No.
Because if rates drop, everybody, now some of you have come off the sidelines. Some of you have come off the sidelines, bit the bullet, took the higher rate, sold your house of 3%, bought a house with 7%. You're in, you've moved, and you're just going to refinance when rates drop. Some of you have already done that. Others have not. That's okay. If that's up to you. I don't push people into a decision, but from a math perspective, if you don't, there are still tons of people on the sideline. And when the rates aren't 7.1 anymore, then this right here is going to go up, 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 up because the demand is going to explode. The demand's already there, but the activity is going to explode.
Right. We've got pent up demand, and that's going to push prices up because if you've got 7 people who want the same property, we've we don't even have to. There's not any. Let's explain that because we just went through it with COVID in the middle of the pandemic, where we were seeing 25 or 30% annual increases in value from the year prior, or sales price. I don't know the value was necessarily there in some of those cases because people were just paying it. They were coming out of pocket with the extra. So
Yeah.
inventory, supply and demand, undeniable. That's not going to change.
So I guess, Zach, when you're talking to somebody, people say, yeah, but and here's the thing. This is why I say we got to look at numbers, and then we have to have a conversation and make an educated forecast on your future. And if you truly are just going to rent for 1 year and that's it and avoid buying, then okay, you save some money by doing so. I've had one customer in the last 9 years that I genuinely felt a little bit bad about. I didn't know this. She told me the day before closing that her job was going to relocate her in 12 months. And she can't believe she's about to buy a house now because she didn't see the amortization table that was in the disclosures. So she was like, I'm never going to pay this thing off. And I'm moving next year and I'm going to be underwater. Well, I told her the way to look at it is, hey, you at least have an investment property then, because you can rent it out and somebody else can pay your mortgage for you, and now you've got another asset. But how many times do we see people who have a plan and life happens, right? You said it at the beginning. You move in, you're there a year, and then it's like, oh, crap. I've been trying to save for a down payment for a year, but my car broke down. Somebody had to have a surgery, and we went on a vacation. And now half my down payment's gone. And now I got to rent for 2 years. And I'm not going to do month to month because the payment goes up $500 a month. So I'm going to just sign another 12-month lease and I'll get back to you.
And then you
Then that
start a
12 months
business.
goes.
Yeah.
Then you do something else.
Easy.
Then the
Yeah.
market explodes. Then you can't find a house. Then you're just going to keep renting. So the math says 1 year is fine to rent. So we're not saying that they can't have there can't be a good strategic benefit to renting for 1 year. But the problem is that a lot of people get in there and then the rut starts and you never get out. And you
Right.
just keep renting and it becomes comfortable. Then you don't want to move. Then you don't want to have to do the movers. Then you can't find anything in your school district. That just excuses. We're human, we're Americans, we're full of excuses, right?
And it's not an unusual situation, Chad, in the volatility of our economy and our local economies, that you could be in a situation where you delayed a purchase idea for 5 to 7 years, and a house is worth 50 or 60% more. The same house costs 50 or 60% more than it did when you should have made that purchase 5 years ago. That's not unusual. You have 2 good years and then 3 steady years, 5 steady years. Crazy.
Yeah. So, like I said, guys, just before you make a decision, you want to do the math. And you want to just have a very candid, upfront, disciplined conversation because you get into these leases and it's hard to get out because also everybody tries to time it perfectly. I've had that before where the lease is coming up. Hey, our lease is going to run out in the next 60 days. So we want to go ahead and be prepared. Well, when we're in a low inventory situation, guess what? It sometimes can be hard to find something in 60 days. I counted this morning. I have 10 people pre-approved who can't find a home. 10.
Yep.
That's $4 or $5 million of real estate pre-approved that can't find a place to go on
Right.
average.
Right.
So then that 60 days is up, and that's where it comes into crap. What are we going to do? We'll just stay. I don't want to pay the landlord an extra 15% for a month-to-month fee. We're just going to stay. We'll pick
Yeah,
this
let's
up
just do
again
it for
next year.
another year and we'll try again next spring.
Yeah.
Well, that's a bad plan because the spring market's always the worst, right? Yeah.
I still love that. I'm going to wait for rates to come down. Worst decision ever. The more rates come down, the more people who come into the market. Your inventory it shrinks even more.
Yeah.
So those are the things in the conversations. Like I said, there are, but I think few situations where the rent can make sense. But a lot of times we're simply telling you this because one, mathematically, it could really turn out to be a bad idea for you. You could miss out on a lot of wealth for your family. Number two, we just know how human behavior is. We procrastinate, we delay, we make excuses, we do all these things, and then it can burn us in the end. So, final thoughts on this?
Well, I love where you ended it because it's kind of all of this comes into a know thyself kind of formula, right? If I'm
Yeah,
somebody who is a procrastinator or who gets overwhelmed, I overthink things as a way to delay. If I get overwhelmed with to do lists like moving my entire life to a new residence, I'm going to find things to kind of blame or to cover. And so I think that I love these calculators because if you're leaning on this idea of, oh, the financial timing isn't right, I want to wait until rates fall. I think that there's going to be a crash in real estate values. Go underneath that and take a look at the real numbers. And it's cheaper. I saw it in the New York Times. There's a calculator out there now. Bad assumptions and bad math. But I saw it in the New York Times. It's cheaper to rent than it is to buy. Well, that would be right in New York City, but it's not in most other metropolitan areas in the United States. So that's the piece of it. Take a look at the math and see if you can uncover another excuse or a fear or a holdback or something else that's standing in your way. Because at the end of the day, down the road, you're not going to be able to blame anybody. I put that meme out, 2 years ago that the very best time to buy real estate ever was 5 years ago.
yeah,
And that's always true, depending on if it was 5 years ago, it was 5 years before that was the best time ever. And the
yeah.
second best time is now, because it's a matter of getting in the game, and then you can exercise a little bit more scrutiny and a little bit more forethought and a little bit more strategy, and be in a position when life happens to you to say, oh, we got a new baby on the way, and we got to get into a different school district, and you've got some assets to help you along the way, because money solves a lot of those problems.
It does. And I want to pull up just one more quick thing that can impact you, and another reason why buying is another better than renting excuse from our side. We don't want this to happen, and we don't want you to get in a bad situation. But what if you end up losing your job? Now you're stuck renting, and you have a lease payment just like you'd have a house payment, but you're stuck renting, right? Because if you lose your job, then there are guidelines in place that could prevent you from qualifying to buy a home when that lease comes up.
Hmm.
So that's just another thing to think about, because obviously we don't want that to happen. But as we said earlier, life happens. And your entire intent could be very disciplined in saying, I'm going to buy in a year, or I'm going to do it whenever. But then again, something negative happens. And now you're stuck paying somebody else's mortgage because you can't qualify to actually buy a home, even though you're ready. And maybe you can still afford the payment, but maybe you don't qualify. We have that happen. Like, there's a
Yeah.
thing called residual income. And what's crazy is families can actually afford mortgages, but sometimes, unless you're a veteran, they don't go off residual income. They go off a debt to income ratio calculation and how long you've been on a job and so forth. And so again, you get stuck and you miss out on appreciation, or it delays you buying a home for another year or 2 years, and you miss out on starting the journey of appreciation. So, yeah, like
All
I
great
said,
points.
everything is fluid. Every situation is different, but it's just make sure you have the conversation, have an open mind, and don't get frustrated and just go, I'm renting, I'm done. And that a lot of time, or don't get tricked by somebody else's numbers. Have the actual conversation. So, all right, that'll do it. Thanks for hanging out with us. Hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend. The month of June is upon us, just a few days away. Hard to believe that we are a little more than 30 days away from being halfway through 2024. That's nuts
Crazy.
if you think
Yeah.
about it. Really insane. And also, kudos to all the realtors and the loan officers and the consumers who have endured this market over the last 2 years,
Mhm.
coming out of what was insane the prior 2 years, and now we're at the other end of the spectrum. So kudos to everybody for just hanging in there in what's been quite the roller coaster over the last 4 years. So, all right, download, subscribe, like, follow, hit the bell, comment, DM, do all the things. Follow us on the socials. Zach Jones Loans. This Chad is real. Appreciate you hanging out. For Zach, I'm Chad. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks for joining us.